Thank you everyone for being with us. Europe finds itself in a fairly transformative period when it comes to its own security concerns. The continued war between Ukraine and Russia, America's potentially changed priorities, statements made by the US Vice President at the Munich Security Conference, which I had attended, have clearly established that there is a paradigm change as far as Europe and its security is concerned. The opportunities are phenomenal, the challenges perhaps even greater. In terms of the technologies which we are now seeing on the battlefront, in terms of the scale of the threats that Europe faces, each country or each region faces, identifies its threats differently. The fact that you've got conflict continuing, and in all of this, you've got wonderful partnerships with countries like India. India and Europe are very close strategic partners. That strategic partnership extends to each one of the countries who've got representatives on this panel. But going forward, when we talk about a strategic relationship, how far can we actually extend that? And is there genuine scope for the Indian defense sector to actually make a mark in Europe, in as much as Europe continuing to make a mark here in India, perhaps through our policy, our belief in Atmanirbharta, but going beyond that, what can be realistically achievable? We've got a wonderful panel. Ambassador Anil Vadwa, former Indian Ambassador and Secretary of the External Affairs Ministry. Ashish Rajvanshi, one of the finest thinkers and not just professionals about the Indian defense space. He's the CEO of Adani Defense. His Excellency Ambassador Philip Ackermann, the German ambassador to India. He's a real friend of India's and certainly someone who is aware of the changes that we now see. Shishir Priyadarshi, the president of the Chintan Research Foundation. Mr. Damien Syed, the deputy head of mission in the Embassy of France. And finally, Ms. Aurora Russi, charge d'affaires at the Embassy of Italy. Thank you all very much for being with us. Ambassador Ackermann, let me come to you first. Do you see India having a potential role as countries across Europe and certainly Germany expand their defense budgets?
What we see is when it comes to Europe, we have this Readiness 2030 program where Europe has pledged to invest 800 billion euros in its own security, but we have also a renewed interest, I would say, a strategic interest in India. First of all, because there is so much in common between India and Europe when it comes to the international global order, but also when it comes to freedom of shipping during the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, I think it is in our core interest that the Indian armed forces are also in a position to defend themselves properly. And we have also every interest to basically seeing the Indian armed forces diversifying. So far, they have been relying on one foreign provider, and I think we have every interest to, offer something that India gets elements of its equipment also from elsewhere.
Ashish, well, the discussions very often have been on how India has the potential to make over here in India, and how there is an incredibly large market over here for countries across the world and companies and technologies to actually invest in. I think that paradigm is changing a lot. And I think, broadly speaking, there are world-class technologies which we have now developed and tested and employed, most recently in Op Sindoor, not least of all drones, which are applicable technology-wise across the world. So in as much as India needs technologies, and we want to certainly build in India, how is India increasingly about, sort of make in India, but build for the world?
I think it's important to appreciate India 2025 is very different from India 2000. The three big milestones in the history of Indian defense sector, the number one was 2014, when for the first time India embarked on the journey of Make in India for indigenous capabilities in defense sector within the country. Number two was the review done after Doklam in 2020, when the Honorable Prime Minister put a complete embargo on any global imports of defense equipment into the country. And number three is 2025, when we fundamentally reviewed the way we look at the conflict with our neighbors after Operation Sindoor. So, having kick-started the journey of self-sufficiency probably 10 years back, where we are standing, is not at a point that we are just the recipient of technology from our global partners. What has happened in the last decade, there has been a significant shift in terms of the mindset, leveraging the engineering talent within the country, the investment which has gone into the ground in terms of both the supply chain and the end equipment, and more importantly, reducing the dependence on the global imports and providing India what truly Indian products are. So there are two different objectives what Indian defense sector has been given. One is, how do you provide the self-sufficiency to Indian Army, Indian Navy, Indian Air Force in terms of the next 20 years plan what they have. The second objective, which has been said by the Honorable Raksha Mantri, is how do we become a global powerhouse in terms of exports. And how the country is doing it is in multiple ways. The journey which started with build to print early 2000 has now gone from multiple points, from build to print to build to spec, to code development, to fundamental innovation. Point in case example, Adani Defense has been working with one of our partners in the Middle Eastern country on the future ready technology of unmanned underwater domain, which is a code development program with joint investment on a global IP which is being developed. So this is not a program we are just picking up a technology from France or Israel or Russia or US. Yeah, this is a program which is forward looking how the marine surveillance is going to look like in 2040 and 2030, how some of these platforms will start replacing the $1 billion P-75 and P-75I submarine programs, and we actually give India and the world the product which are going to define the future of warfare. The same revolution what India went through early 2000 in telecom, when we leapfrogged from the landline phones directly to mobile, reaching a point that 1.2 billion people are actually on the mobile phone, leveraging the 5G technology today, which is the largest in the whole world along with UPI payments. We are standing at the same transformation where this is not about having 50 years of technological leadership. The point we are standing is what we have seen from Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas, and even Operation Sindoor is, do you have the right volume in terms of capacity? Do you have low cost production? Do you have lethality, which is not coming in billions of dollars, but in $10,000 to $20,000? And you combine this, and you're actually going to win the way it happened in Azerbaijan versus Armenia or in many other places. So, to Vishnu, your point, the Indian players and the Indian defense market is no longer about just taking technology, but the next 10 years, establishing technological leadership in the global markets, working with our partners, and becoming one of the key suppliers to even European Union because of the technological base we have developed.
Mr. Damian Syed, in as much as Ashish was speaking about the potential of India, there are clearly areas where India and most countries in the world still lack. And one of the holy grails in defense manufacturing is jet engine technology. And that's where France can potentially come in a big way. And obviously, a serious transfer of technology when it comes to jet engines is only possible if there's a level of trust. How is the defense relationship between India and France premised on that trust? And do we believe that will really translate into serious manufacture of jet engine components in India?
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. Thank you to CRF for organizing this panel on major topics. To answer your questions, because you raised different issues. First of all, I would fully agree with you on the term confidence, trust. I think that it is at the basis, at the core of the Indo-French relations. We have this strong strategic partnership. Defense is a pillar of this partnership. It was launched in 1998, so it's a long-standing relation based on trust, as I said, between equals. We share the same ambitions as India. In terms of strategic autonomy, it's at the core of the French security doctrine, as you know. It has been promoted by President Macron over the last few years. For France, it's part of our history, but also at the European level. And it's more than ever a necessity to develop the strategic autonomy of Europe, like India is doing already within the Atmanirbhar Bharat policy. It's very close to the strategic autonomy. So for that, we can rely on strong assets. We have major defense companies, Safran, Thales, Dassault, to name a few. And also thousands of SMEs in France contributing to this collective effort to reinforce the defense sector of Europe and our equipments or capacities, like Ambassador Ackerman just highlighted. In the face of this chaotic world, these geopolitical changes, we mentioned the war in Ukraine, the change of the evolution of the US administration. All these are inciting us, are pushing us to do more with India.
Mr. Aurora Russi, how does Italy define your strategic partnership with India? I've seen the deployment of Italian warships in the Indian Ocean region. Maritime security is an area where Italy is growing, and you are now projecting as well in the waters of the Asia Pacific. India has a prominent place over there. How is maritime security fundamental, in a sense, in the relationship between our countries?
2023, we have elevated our ties to a strategic relations, and this was announced by the two prime ministers here in Delhi in March 2023. And we have given substance to these strategic relations by signing a defense cooperation MOU. And by institutionalizing frequent meetings between our joint defense committees. The last one was held in April 2025, so it's something that's been going on. We are also working on a roadmap in defense cooperation. And all these things find their realization, their concrete realization in this approach to the approach of the Italian Navy. Both India and Italy are two naval powers, there's no doubt about it. Since 2023, we had 4 important port calls that called together joint exercises between the Marines. In 2023, we had Nave Morosini. We also had the entire Italian carrier strike group, Nave Cavour and Nave Alpino. 2024, we had our Vespucci, which is the historical vessel that's been touring the world basically, and the port call in Mumbai was one of the most anticipated that we definitely had. And recently, in 2025, in June, that is a month ago, 2 months ago, we had another port call by our Fregata Marceglia. This was done in the wider context of the Atalanta mission. But in all these occasions, we have been having joint exercises in international water with the Indian navies.
And yet, Ambassador Wadhwa, to strike a balancing note, let me ask you a tough question. None of the ambassadors and diplomats over here would be particularly happy about the fact that India continues and will always have a very close relationship with Russia, because we are autonomous in our foreign policy and in our military policy. So, is that increasingly a challenge for India from a foreign policy standpoint, balancing an excellent relationship with all of the countries in Europe that we are talking about, and a time-tested relationship with Russia?
So I think, Vishnu, it's quite clear that India has had a long-standing relationship, and especially the defense relationship with Russia. And it's a very important relationship if you look at what's happened in the past. Because the relationship actually was flourishing when no one else, and especially in Europe for that matter, was coming forward to collaborate with India. There was a phase which we went through like that. We are now in a different situation, and just as the Ambassador of Germany mentioned just now, India has diversified quite a bit in the last few years, if you notice. India would like to diversify, and the corollary to that is that India would like to manufacture as much as possible within the country. So that's the change which has come about. Another point that I would like to mention before I finish is that the emphasis that we have now in terms of going in for technologies which can last us not just for a few years but for 15 to 20 years in the future means that we are actually concentrating ourselves on what we can do to leapfrog, as this is the word that we just heard, in terms of technologies. And we have the wherewithal to do it, provided we have an ecosystem which can be fostered. But we need partners. And in that partnership, I think Europe becomes very important.
You use the word ecosystem, and that was my next question to Ashish. Two parts to it. What is new to me in the Indian sort of system, as it were, and the involvement of private players, is the quality of manufacture. You can't go wrong with that if you want to be a world-class manufacturer, not just for India, but for anywhere else in the world. And secondly, ecosystem, where there are ancillary manufacturers, sometimes small companies, which have to deliver to that standard. Now, that's not an experience which we've necessarily had in India. To have that level of training and manufacture, for example, in what you are doing, to actually broad base the potential of your own products, how much of a challenge is that, and what is the future there?
When we started to talk with our global partners, there were three concerns which were articulated probably a decade back. One was protection of IP. Second was quality of manufacturing in terms of the reliability has to be 100%. It cannot be, I'm giving you 91% or 95%. And the third was quality of manpower. In each of the areas, I think, again, the country has grown leaps and bounds. And why? Because until 2010, most of the sector at the MSME was limited to tier 2, tier 3, working as part of either the global supply chain or working as part of the DPSU supply chain within the country. And with a lot of respect, the DPSUs within the country didn't have the same standards in terms of quality, digitization, cyber requirements, IP requirements, what was demanded from the global markets. With the level playing field being created for the private sector, this is no longer an option. We come from a brand where this is not only about defense, but talking about Adani operating across 18 businesses. So when I'm delivering even a small arm or a small caliber ammunition, I have to look into the eyes of Vice Chief of Army and the DG Infantry that every ammunition coming out of Kanpur is NATO certified and 100% reliable, and you're not going to find a single fault when it's going to be used when the time comes. And that is a confidence building which the private sector has been doing in the last couple of years. What has been the challenge? The challenge is India never saw a pool of talent which has actually worked on systems. So people have been working on components, subsystems, small parts here and there, but talking about I want to do AVACs tomorrow, I want to do engines tomorrow, the capability doesn't exist. But how is the sector overcoming this? Again, a couple of aspects. One is the joint collaboration with our partners. When we kickstarted the whole unmanned aerial vehicle program with our partners in India, for 9 months, more than 150 people of Adani were located in that country getting trained. And that is an investment we have to do because we can't expect people to learn on VCs and just by anecdotes. So that became a very important element. The second part, how do you continue to establish that excitement and the academic rigor when it comes to aerospace and defense? So most of the engineering graduates were trying to gravitate towards computer science, mechanical engineering. The brain drain was happening, what we have seen and witnessed between 2000 and 2015. And how do you create a vibrant platform to retain this talent within the country, providing opportunities? And the third was sensitizing what cyber and digitization means. So again, an abused word in the Indian context. Even an Excel sheet or a macro or even a simple application could be digitization. But what we are talking about is the expectation in defense. If I'm looking for end-to-end audit trail in terms of where my raw material was procured in 2011, or from where my subsystem was coming, we have seen the example of some of the Western companies who have struggled recently because they were not able to manage the quality and the supply chain because of lack of visibility and transparency and the ERP systems. It becomes impossible. So a lot is happening. And
But let me ask you a follow-up to what you're saying. I found it fascinating when you're talking about trained manpower, skilled workforces in India. This reminds me of the ISRO story, let's say about 25, 30 years back. When you had the first generation, more than 30 years back, let's say about 40 years back, the first generation of skilled scientists and engineers coming out of regional engineering colleges, entering ISRO, picking up skills, and they're all world leaders now. And where there is a certain supply of incredible potential and talent from Indian engineering colleges to the space sector, specifically ISRO by and large. Do you see that happening in the Indian defense space, in the Indian private defense space?
It's already happening. See, what we have done in Adani also, we knew we are not going to find the perfect talent. In every domain where we are focusing, let's take example of what we are doing in kamikaze or missiles, for example. We have a trio or a network of experts. There are a couple of senior scientists from DRDO who were the designers of missiles like Akash in the past, in 80s, who are acting like the mentors to the young generation. There's a second domain of the users, because it's very important to understand how this missile is actually going to be deployed and used by Indian Army or Navy or Air Force, because me as a civilian may not be able to appreciate what's happening on the ground. The third part is the subject matter expert on manufacturing and quality assurance. And fourth, an element which is understated but very important, the commercial mindset to make the business work. Because we were relatively the late entrants in late 2018, 2019. And when I did the review of what went wrong in the Indian defense sector, you either have an armed forces guy who's leading the business, a lot of heart, but limited commercial acumen. You have a manufacturing expert who is leading the business, lot of manufacturing, but no understanding of technology and operations. You have a scientist who is leading the business, who wants to go deep into the technology, but doesn't know how to convert it into serial production and a business on its own. Or you have a MBA who's leading the business, who doesn't know anything about without counting beans. So how do you bring this combination to the table is what Indian industry had to learn. At least we have learned the hard way in Adani, and that's why we have a very vibrant ecosystem. But it's all happening.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and Chintan as well for bringing us on board to talk about a really evolving relationship, one that's tremendously exciting, with technology prospects and business prospects all enmeshed in this broadening strategic relationship. Thank you very much for being with us.